Happy Halloween week, Conner High. Today is Tuesday, October 27th. I'm Francisco.
And I'm Tyler. In today's show, we'll talk about the first murder hornet nest in the U.S. and have a very special interview with the district's mental health specialist.
So stay tuned for today's episode of Total Recap. Are you scared of flying insects? Well, then listen up. On Saturday, the Washington State Department of Agriculture destroyed the first ever nest of murder hornets. The nest of Asian giant hornets, also known as murder hornets, where they're killing of bees, was the size of a basketball and contained 100 hornets. The crew eliminated the nest of hornets by vacuuming them into large canisters. More specifically, 85 hornets were killed while 13 were taken alive for research. The WSDA states the hornets were first sighted in December of 2019 and is actively trying to preserve the hornets from growing in numbers. Scary. Make sure to keep your wasp spray close by.
On December 4th, the 16th annual John Cooper School's Signature Author Series will have an award-winning author and virtual viewing options as precaution due to the pandemic. This year's author is Jesmyn Ward, a Tulane University professor who has written a number of bestsellers focused on the South. The event will be hosted at the Waterway Marriott Hotel and Convention Center and begins at 10:30 a.m. Tickets are $150 for in-person visits for those interested. A virtual option is also in the works.
We will now take it to a quick commercial break.
What's up, Conner High? Did you enjoy the talent show last year, but you weren't able to compete last year due to an entry deadline? Well, now is your chance to audition. Starting November 2nd, we will start accepting entries and auditions in 2 ways. You can tag us or DM us on Instagram at KTIG News, or you can email your audition to ktignews@gmail.com. The final day for open auditions will be November 30th. No auditions will be accepted after November 30th. As always, have a great day, CHS, and good luck.
Seems like vape flavors are less about helping people quit and more about getting a new generation hooked on nicotine. How sweet. 81% of youth who have ever used e-cigs started with flavors.
What's up, Conner High? I'm Ian, your weather anchor for today, and let's take a look at your weather forecast. It looks to be mostly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 72 and a low of 64. As we look at tomorrow, it will also be cloudy with a high of 68 and a low of 45 with a long cold front coming in. Heading to Thursday, it will be mostly sunny day with a high of 64 and a low of 49. And for Friday, it will have a high of 64 and a low of 48 being mostly sunny. And Saturday, having a high of 69 and a low of 51 being mostly sunny. Now for our random fact of the day. Plants have ways of communicating with each other. The scent of freshly cut. Now we'll take it to a special interview with Miss Kelly Locke.
Since this week is Red Ribbon Week, we invited the district's mental health specialist, Miss Kelly Locke, today to talk a little bit about vaping and addiction. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Locke. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful this morning.
Good.
So today we just wanted to talk a little bit about vaping. Can you tell us why vaping is bad and why students should stay away from vaping?
Yeah, so vaping was never created as something just to start doing, like your first exposure to nicotine. It was actually created to stop people from smoking. And so it has a lot of the same chemicals that cigarettes do. If you think about formaldehyde, I always have to look at how to say it. Acrolein, it's an eye and respiratory irritant, so it actually irritates your lungs. It has a chemical in there that causes popcorn lung, which is holes in your lungs, and then it does contain heavy metals and other chemicals. So again, it was used what we call a cessation device, so to stop from smoking. And even the companies or the heads of major companies like Juul and others have said, we don't want anyone to start using this product who didn't already use cigarettes and they're using it to stop. They've come out and said, you know, that's not what the product is made for. And so it was created around the idea of a theatrical smoke machine. If you can think about all of that comes out of that theatrical smoke machine, that's what's going into your lungs. So it still has some pretty harmful things in it.
So is nicotine really that bad for you?
It is. So nicotine is the most addictive chemical and the quickest to become addicted to chemical. And so with the ability to adapt pods with vaping, and people are starting to really increase nicotine in there. And so some people have said they can feel dependent, which is the first stage to addiction, even after one hit. And if you think about it, even just the way that it's created, so for instance, Juul pods, they use something called nicotine salts, which give you 30% more nicotine per puff. And so you're getting that much more chemical going into your body, and it takes about 7 seconds for the nicotine to hit your brain and start having a chemical reaction to it. And so when teenagers use it, you are in prime brain development stage. Your brain is firing so fast. You guys are just like amazing, the brain power you have right now. And so when you introduce that chemical to it, it starts interrupting that. It starts affecting we call it the executive functioning of your brain. So your ability to learn, your ability to stay focused, and control your emotions are all connected to that. So controlling emotions is kind of like, we can look at depression and anxiety. So some people will say, hey, you know, Miss Locke, I use my vape to cope with my anxiety or cope with my depression, but what they don't realize is it's actually making that worse. And that's the addiction cycle, is you start to come down off of that hit, your anxiety and depression increase, and that makes your body want it more. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
So then we just have to know that nicotine kind of sets us up for other addictions, because if we start nicotine really young, eventually we're going to want more, and that can lead into THC and methamphetamines and cocaine and harder drugs.
So does that mean everyone who vapes will have a gateway to harder drugs?
No, it just means it's opening that door, and that is dependent a lot on genetics. And so you might see someone and you're like, hey, they're perfectly fine and they vaped for a while. Well, they might not have that genetic component of addiction, and we all don't know what's in our genes. We don't know every single person and whether they struggle with addiction or not, so we don't know what we're opening the door to with that. And so it doesn't mean that everyone will, it just means that it can lead you down that road. And no one ever starts vaping saying, you know, I want to be addicted to methamphetamines or cocaine. But there are people who end up down that road. So we just don't know when we start where we'll end up.
So earlier you mentioned THC. Is THC really different from traditional marijuana bud or weed?
It is. So, you know, and before I go into all the detail, just want to define a couple things, because we kind of use THC in a more common term right now. Maybe we say we use that for concentrates, that term for it, but really THC is the chemical in marijuana that gives you the high. Okay, so it's going to be in all forms of a marijuana product. And so if you think of traditional bud or weed from the 60s, that had about 3% THC. So very small levels of THC. You didn't get the super high, so it didn't lead you down the same road of addiction, right? So now, if you were going to get traditional bud or weed off the streets, in Houston they've tested it and it's about 22 to 28% THC. But if you were going to do a concentrate, which is hash, keef, moon rocks, shatter, wax, all the different terms, there's even more terms than that you could use, that's about 90% THC. And so it is such high potency that your body doesn't know what to do with it, and that's what's leading people down the road to what we call cannabis-induced psychosis, which cannabis is weed, right? So it's making people look like they have schizophrenia when it's really just induced from the product that they're putting in their body. So schizophrenia, you're paranoia, you might see things, you might hear things. I mean, some pretty scary stuff can happen in that. And so that's why it's not the same product as it was back then, so we can't compare it.
You mentioned addiction earlier. Mm-hmm. Does it mean you are weak if you feel if you're addicted to something?
No, and I get that question a lot. Like, why can't I just kick this? I should just be able to stop. Why can't I? And maybe someone else did. And you say, that's a stronger person. I'm weak. But it's not, because again, we don't know our genetics. And so we could have the genetic component for addiction, and it makes it really hard, and it doesn't mean that you're weak. Addiction is real. And the scary thing is that a teenager's world right now is created around addiction, because a lot of smart people have figured out how to get people addicted to their product, because then they'll use it more, right? So you're fighting addiction with technology, with social media, and then you throw things in like vaping and THC, and so you're constantly fighting addictions and having to make adult decisions in a teenage world. So I would say you guys are pretty strong generation to fight against all of that. I didn't have those same issues. So it does not mean that you are weak. It just means that that's the way that the chemicals reacted in your body.
How can a student get help if they feel they have a problem with vaping or addiction?
Yeah, so a biggest part of my job is educating students on things like this, so maybe they don't start. We would love for no one to start, but the reality is maybe some people have started, and my biggest message is it's not too late to stop, especially if you are in high school. It's never too late to stop, but there are studies after studies that say that if you stop now in high school, then your brain will actually repair some of the damage that nicotine did to it. So we talked before about what nicotine's done to your brain. Your brain can actually repair itself. So now is a prime time to stop. So if you're struggling with addiction and you want to stop, great people to reach out to: your parents, your school counselor, a trusted adult. If you're nervous to go to those, reach out to a friend who can go with you and talk to them, because now is the time. I mean, you have your whole life ahead of you, so it would be great to kind of get a handle on that and stop, and think about the resiliency skills for that. If you could kick a habit of nicotine or THC in high school, I mean, I think you could face anything in life and do well. So, yeah.
Well, that was a really intense topic. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Ms. Locke. You have a wonderful day.
Oh, thanks. You too.
In honor of Red Ribbon Week, happy Triumphant Tuesday, Conroe High. Today we want to talk about being triumphant and staying off drugs. It is important to remain off drugs and value your overall health. By making the right choices, you're sending a positive message to yourself. It is better for your long-term health to not vape, smoke cigarettes, or use hardcore drugs.
Using some of these items can be very dangerous and can relate to major injuries such as a weakened immune system, heart conditions, lung disease, seizures, strokes, mental confusion, and brain damage. Heroin use and overdose deaths have dramatically increased over the last decade. This increase is related to the growing number of people misusing prescription opioid pain relievers like OxyContin and Vicodin.
We have a great show planned for you tomorrow with an update from Dr. Smith in our Teacher of the Week interview.
Make sure to tune in each and every day so you don't miss out. Also, we will have a special Friday edition of Total Recap this week. Be looking for that.
Well, those are all the announcements that we have for today. Don't forget to follow us on all social media at KTIG News.
As always, CHS, start strong, finish strong. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for more KTIG news.